What's up, guys? Dylon here, and today we're going to talk about Bitcoin crashing. Now what? So like this video, subscribe, share, and let's get into it. None of this is financial advice. I'm no expert. I'm just a guy who likes Bitcoin and talks about it on the internet a lot. Anyways, you can see by these articles that we have Bitcoin crashing. Bitcoin crashed to 8.9K on BitMEX. That's a wild story. So I'm taking in some of this now as I'm sharing it. Large sell orders worth 55.49 million drove Bitcoin's price down to 8.9 thousand on BitMEX. The overnight crash was short-lived. So it looks like a flush out in the system, right? This is generally when this kind of stuff happens. There's too much leverage people are using. This is, yes, you read that right. Monday suffered a brief crash. It was as low as 8,900 on cryptocurrency exchange BitMEX, while prices on other exchanges held well above 60,000. So this is like one thing that can happen is they can basically run kind of like this would be like an attack on the price of Bitcoin, where you find an exchange with less liquidity and you create immense sell pressure to just cause the price on that exchange to collapse. And when that happens, like if you can buy it up at 8.9 thousand, like you're lucky. The slide began and then prices fell. Right? Let's see here. So let's see here. Let's see. Some versions on social media allege that whale selling catalyzed the price crash. Someone sold over 850 BTC on BitMEX, right? So they drove the pair down to 8,900. So it's looking into large sell orders. They're launching an investigation. So it's basically an attack, right? So people are always going to find ways to attack the market, attack the price. We can look at the price over here. If we can get to the market, this looks at 7 days. Let's do the month. 7 days has not been friendly towards Bitcoin. We see we have lower lows, lower highs going in. General trend. Of course, I'm no trader. You know, one day, boom, that's pretty drastic crash. It's just liquidity being pulled out of the market, right? And then fear, and then people reacting to that, and then trading algorithms and bots trying to trade the asset. But what's happening is, and this is why like you shouldn't be worried, depending on what mindset you have. If you have a fiat mindset, I'm going to talk about this a lot, but if you have a fiat mindset, you're always thinking in US dollars. I'm going to take this in US dollars. This is, I put $60,000 in, or if you bought when I told you to buy, or when I talked about buying at 70,000, you're freaking out because you bought at 72,000, and now it's down to 62,000 or whatnot. And that's a problem if you're fiat thinking. It's less of a problem if you're Bitcoin thinking. Fiat thinking is how much, I'm going to put US dollars in, and how many US dollars am I going to get out? Right? Pretty simple. That's what we've all grown up with. That's the and that's the idea that people have. That's the idea people have with stocks and all this other stuff. Bitcoin thinking is, how do I acquire more Bitcoin? Right? With the resources that I have on hand, the fiat resource, because clearly there's a disparity between the timeline of value increase and decrease of fiat assets and Bitcoin. In Bitcoin, we won't even say Bitcoin assets, but Bitcoin, there's a disparity in that timeline. I mean, look at this chart of what Bitcoin's done against the dollar over the past month, right? So clearly they don't hold their value in the same way. And so what people will do with Bitcoin is like, how can I get more purchasing power over time? How can I move my things into Bitcoin, right? And if we look at Bitcoin versus the fiat dollar, this is obviously reversed. Generally, all charts, when you compare Bitcoin to the fiat dollar, their price in dollars, they start high initially, right? Bitcoin was young, like being the amount of Bitcoin it takes, and then they trail off. It takes less and less Bitcoin to buy the things, and we're going to see that trend continue, right? So you see this chart, it takes more and more fiat dollars to buy one Bitcoin. People in Bitcoin space like to say, hey, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. So how can you acquire more? So back to this. If you bought at $72,000 and you went all in, if you did a fiat thinking, you're probably stressed out because you're down probably more than you are down in stocks. Now, I don't necessarily think you should be too worried, because I think that this is a flush out. This happens during bull markets when there's leverage, when there's stuff built up, when there's opportunities. People will attack this market and they take it. And I think it's a good thing long term, because the weak will get cold and the strong will survive, right? So if exchanges can't keep up, if they can't live up to their promises, if they're not safe, the market will exploit them, and that's just a natural reality. And you want an asset that can survive that, but in the process, there's going to be some volatility. It is what it is. So if you have the fiat mindset, look, you're probably bummed because Bitcoin is down in 7 days, right? What is it, 12%? And that's a whole year's worth of returns on the S&P, a good year. So not ideal there if you were thinking that you were just going to skyrocket to the moon. But I think we're still going to go up past 70,000. We're still going to go up past that mark. We're still going to put in bigger all-time highs this market. It's just the demand and everything is still in place. Nothing has changed about Bitcoin, but everything has changed about people's perceptions of Bitcoin. So this kind of stuff is inevitable. These dips should be tremendous buying opportunities. If you're fiat minded and Bitcoin minded, right, this is just an opportunity to acquire more Bitcoin for less fiat, right, so that you can lower your cost average if you're in, or if you're entering into the market at this point in time before one of potentially the greatest bull runs that we've ever seen. Now, will that play out? I don't know. I hope so. Right? All indicators are that we'll have something like that, but you never know. You never know. We could have a different conversation, but this is why it's important to be Bitcoin thinking, have Bitcoin mindset on these things. The Bitcoin thinking is one Bitcoin, one Bitcoin. I know I've repeated myself, but one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. And what that means is you don't really care. You care, but you don't care what the fiat price is. You just want to acquire more Bitcoin with whatever you can and however you can. And so the Bitcoiners they'll buy Bitcoin at 70K, they'll buy it at 60K, 50K, they'll buy it. They'll always be buying Bitcoin. They'll always be taking the energy that they earn in fiat world, because most of us and most people live in fiat world right now. Bitcoin world is a small world, and only a small select few of people can live and operate fully in Bitcoin world. Now that's becoming more and more people are making that transition, and more individuals' wealth is moving into the Bitcoin world and the Bitcoin landscape. But as of right now, most people live and operate in fiat world, making the US dollar, trading their time for dollars, right? Dollars for hours. It's most people's reality, most people's existence, and so they are playing by the rules of that. It's like most people are in Chuck E. Cheese's, that's the fiat world, playing those arcade games and everything like that, and they want to cash out to real things, and that's the Bitcoin world, real things. Most people got that backwards. They think Bitcoin is Chuck E. Cheese land, and the fiat world is the real things, but Bitcoin is real money, and fiat money is not. Anyways, most people, a Bitcoin mindset, they're going to take the value they generate in the fiat world, and they know that the stores of value in that world are insecure. The fiat dollar, obviously, over time, that is just trending to zero. You're losing value, especially the more money you have, the more money you're losing just by holding in fiat dollars. That's why the rich and wealthy, they put it in assets. Assets, right? That's people will put their money in assets. The problem with the assets is a lot of them are backed by the dollar, and that Bitcoin exists. Bitcoin can siphon off wealth and investment dollars and demand from assets due to its performance and its unique nature as an asset that is, there's no counterparty risk, right? It's a decentralized asset, and it has an incorruptible ledger, right? These are all very, very valuable things that, for example, real estate, even though real estate has done really, really well, in the future, people are going to start talking about, and Bitcoiners talk about this all the time, buying Bitcoin instead of a house, okay? When you have disparities between the cost of rent and the cost of a mortgage, right? So when it's cheaper to rent than to have a mortgage, you're going to have people with a Bitcoin mindset that will say, if it costs me $1,500 to rent or $2,000 to mortgage my house, why don't I just do this? Why don't I just pay $1,500 to rent, not have to worry about the stuff at the house, and I'll take that extra $500 every single month and buy Bitcoin. You're going to have people start doing that and arbitraging the value that they get from Bitcoin versus the expense, the cost to live in fiat. And they're going to take that risk and start doing that. And people are already doing that. Right? That is a Bitcoin mindset. They're thinking, how can I earn more Bitcoin? And so when Bitcoin goes up, people are excited. I think Bitcoiners are still stuck in that fiat mindset. Like I like when it goes down, because over time Bitcoin is going up, and when it goes down, it means it's less expensive for me to buy it, because a 12% dip in Bitcoin in a day is an opportunity for me, because my salary didn't increase by 12%. It's never going to increase by 12% in a day unless I get a raise. That's like a one-time a year thing. Okay? So when Bitcoin goes down by 12%, that's a sale. That means the same dollars that I earn for my hour of work in the fiat world can buy me more Bitcoin. That's amazing. That's great. So you should be excited when that happens if you have a strategy to allocate funds to Bitcoin, and if you have a long-term strategy at that, to just acquire more Bitcoin over time, and you understand it's scarce, it's limited, they're not making more Bitcoin, and it's treat it as an asset that you want to acquire more of, not an asset that you want to trade in and out of to get more fiat things. Because the question is, when you sell your Bitcoin, if you had bought it at 30 and you sold it, you were going to sell it at 72, but you thought it was going to go higher, and then now it's at 62. So now you're thinking about selling. You got a $32,000 difference, right? When you bought it and you sold it, so that amount can be taxed. So you got to deal with that. Now you're like, okay, I got the extra, $30,000 less, probably like $20,000 because of the taxes of that short-term capital gains tax if you did it within a year. Of course, not a tax expert. But now you're like, what am I going to buy? What other things am I going to put this money in? So one, you could just wait and try for a lower entry point, but then you run the risk of, you had all that energy loss, that capital loss from the taxes and everything. And when I'm doing this, I'm like drawing on my desk. But you have the capital loss from the taxes and the trading and those fees and all that kind of stuff. So you have less capital to work with. So Bitcoin has to go substantially lower for you to be able to re-enter and have more Bitcoin, right? Or you can try to buy something else, but if you try to buy something else in the ecosystem, it may work out, but you generally are taking more risk, and then you go through that process again of having to sell, lose some of that capital in that process, and then have to re-enter at a point where it makes sense so that you actually could acquire more Bitcoin. Or if you just keep it in fiat dollars, obviously we know that's going to go down. Or if you start paying off expenses and stuff with the Bitcoin, well, you got to be careful thinking that way. You got to think through it a little more long term. If Bitcoin is doing 20% in a month, right? Even if you had a credit card bill to pay off, and it's good to pay off your credit card bills. You only, over the course of the credit cards, like they charge like 23, 24, 25, 26, 27% interest for a year. Bitcoin did 20% in a month. Bitcoin's done, if you look at a year, it's at 129% in a year. So if you would have sold your Bitcoin when it was at $30,000, if you had been getting in when it was 15 to then pay off credit card bills, but you would have missed out on all of this. Now, selling around up here to pay off a credit card bill when you bought down here, look, I understand you got to do what you got to do, right? You got to take care of business, but then you don't have the Bitcoin. Okay, so you got to make sure you have capital and value stored somewhere so you can reallocate into Bitcoin so you can get that Bitcoin back, because you don't want to have less sats. And I want this to stick with you, and I'll end the video on this, is you want to, if you shift from fiat thinking to Bitcoin thinking, and that's the whole reason you'd buy this asset, unless you're purely just speculating and trading and think it's all nonsense. But I obviously don't believe that, especially because it's around. So what I believe about Bitcoin is that it is a new system, and it's going to be an asset that you're going to want to have. And trading in and out of the asset will work for some people. It won't work for most people. And in general, I think you could have a trading strategy, but you should also have a Bitcoin acquisition strategy. And with your Bitcoin acquisition strategy, long-term saving strategy, you want to have more sats today than yesterday, more sats tomorrow than today. And that's that strategy. You can have another strategy that you do differently, right? And don't cross them unless you want to just buy more sats and add to that position from your other strategy, right? Because like most people have that fiat strategy that they're working to add value and accrue value, and then they have a Bitcoin acquisition strategy. Okay, it's okay that you have those two different ones. You don't have to do everything in Bitcoin at this point in time. So I implore you to think about that when you think about the price, when you see these crashes, like, hey, this is an opportunity that your dollar is worth more in Bitcoin. It can buy you more Bitcoin. You can stack more sats today than you could yesterday. Take advantage of that opportunity. Don't be scared. Get out of the fiat thinking, oh no, I can't sell my Bitcoin. Start getting into the thinking of, oh yes, I can buy more Bitcoin. So that's it for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't be scared. Be prepared. I'm Dylan. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.